Hi everyone. We're going to get going, I think. Just wait for Richard to sit down. It's really lovely to see you all in the room, and a big welcome as well to our online audience today. My name's Jo Lansdown.
Hi everyone.
I'm hearing my voice coming out here. Just wait for Richard to sit down. Just waiting for people to press some buttons. It's really lovely to see you. I think that's good now. So I'm Jo Lansdown. I'm part of the Watershed team. I'm executive producer of Pervasive Media Studio, and it's my job today just to welcome you, really. So I'm going to start with a little bit of housekeeping, so hopefully everyone feels settled. So we're not expecting a fire drill today. If that happens and you're in the building, our front of house team will come and lead us out of the building. The convening space to meet is like the crepe stand at the top of the watery steps in the centre of Bristol. There's toilets for everyone just outside of these doors here. Please make yourself comfortable, come and go as you need to, but we will have a bit of a break and I'll cover that in a minute. We've got some photography today, so if you don't feel comfortable with being photographed or filmed, you can just let one of the team know, and we'll make sure that our brilliant photographer Sham doesn't capture you. You'll be able to recognise the staff team today because they'll either be wearing a kind of a lanyard like this around their necks, or they'll be wearing pink high vis. So if there's anything you need at any point, just let one of us know. I think that covers that side of things. So the way that today is going to work is that after me, we'll have a bit of a welcome from Oscar, the operations director for My World, who is the wider programme that the More Than AI Sandbox is a part of. And then we'll hear from Martin, who's the studio lead here at Watershed, a bit more about More Than AI Sandbox, what it is and what the teams have been up to. Then we'll hear from the teams, and we'll have a comfort break at 12 o'clock and lunch at 1:15. And then after that, the afternoon is for you to go and kind of engage with the work, explore the prototypes that have been made, and talk to some of the people that you will have heard from in the first part of the day. So a few thank yous, first of all. I wanted to say thank you, of course, to My World and our funders, UKRI, for their trust in us to produce this part of the wider programme. To Arts Council England, who support the work of Pervasive Media Studio. To the brilliant Watershed team. I'm not going to name them all, but I will name Emma, our Sandbox producer, for leading us through this process. But for the many other members of the team who came together to make hard things possible. Thank you to our BSL interpreters today, our filmmaker John, to Sham, who I mentioned is taking photographs. And for the Sandbox, as you'll hear a little bit more about, we had an amazing group of advisors who came together from different backgrounds and disciplines and parts of the world to support our teams along the way. You'll hear from some of them today because they're chairing our panels, but not everyone's here, so we wanted to say a special thank you to them. To our venue partners who've been helping to share some of the work of the teams, and all of the play testers who've got involved along the way. Of course, to you, you're going to be the latest set of play testers here today. The work that the teams will be sharing is not finished. They've had a few months to embark on a complicated experiment. So the invitation today is to get involved, feedback, say what's exciting or interesting or doesn't work for you. It's a brave and vulnerable thing to share work at an early stage. So my last thanks go to all of the creative teams that have been part of More Than AI Sandbox for trusting us with your ideas. So I've said I'm from Watershed, but I haven't said what Watershed is. Hopefully most of you know that, but for anyone that doesn't, Watershed is where we are today. We're a cultural organisation focused on togetherness. whether that's bringing people together to watch a film, as people often do in this room, eat a meal, make work, or explore new ideas. We believe it's better done together. And as part of that mission, we run Pervasive Media Studio in collaboration with both the University of Bristol and the University of the West of England as a research and development space where people come together to experiment with creative technology. Defining creative technology is always hard, so I'm going to tell you what I think. I believe that technology describes the collection of ideas, tools, practices and systems which humans use to shape the world around us. Creative technology means the way that we do this is not inevitable, but can be reimagined. So today you'll hear a bit about what that reimagining has looked like in the More Than AI Sandbox. But I wanted to leave you with one thought, which is that often when we're talking about technology and innovation, we really foreground the new, and you'll hear a lot of new things today, and they are clearly computing developments relating to artificial intelligence that are new and exciting. But I also think it's important to acknowledge that asking questions about what makes up the world, trying to recreate it, and in doing so, finding new ways of relating to it, that's old work. And as Adrienne Marie Brown says, I love knowing that the practices of mimicking the natural world have been happening since humans came into existence. This is actually an ancient practice, a recovery rather than a discovery. So I'd invite that to take that into the day with you. I hope you have a brilliant time, and I'm going to hand over to Oscar.
Thanks, Jo. Hi, everybody. Sorry. There we go. Hi, I'm Oscar. I know a lot of you, but not everybody. I'm involved with the team from Bristol University that's helping to deliver the My World programme. We've had the great privilege, as Jo said, of providing the cash behind this sandbox, and hopefully some of the other things that we've done in the programme can be kind of networked in to create some more opportunities for you all after this. My World is a pretty unique collaboration in terms of its scale and its breadth, the thing that it's doing. 13 organisations spread across the west of England and beyond, 5 years, pretty massive grant that came with it, and our job is to try and use that money and the resources that we have, the expertise of all of our partners wisely, to create opportunities. That's really what we're about. There's a high-level ambition is to create a range of opportunities for artists, producers, businesses, individual learners, cultural organisations, everybody that makes up our collective creative community within the west of England. So how are we doing that? We're trying to put the money to good use in terms of creating new experimental studio facilities, research facilities, business accessible facilities, setting up new training programs that are very accessible in terms of ways in and the different levels that they address. Trying to make equipment available to people like yourselves, to companies, to individual freelancers. Investing in research. We have 4 fantastic complementary universities in our region, which is pretty unique in terms of our geography. Together, they are world leading in a range of different disciplines, which is a great asset that we have here. And lastly, we're investing, well, we're not investing, we are delivering R&D funding to companies like yourselves, individuals like yourselves, to go and explore, like Jo said, what creative technology means to you. And it seems like that was a good idea, looking at some of the projects that you have here today. I came along to the playtest a few weeks ago and was just blown away, as I always am when I come and see projects here. I think it's a great complement to the network and the community that Watershed and Pervasive Media Studio cultivate here, that you're all taking part in this. I love the freedom that the Sandbox process gives you all to explore a theme, in this case, proliferation of AI across creative technology, from the perspective of what that means to you personally, drawing on your own experiences, your own perspectives, and then interpreting that. And you can see that that process is both valuable and works in a practical sense by the diversity and range of the projects that you've all come up with. So long may this Sandbox process continue. It's fantastic. So lastly, I'll just say a couple of thank yous. A huge thank you to our partners, Watershed, for delivering the Sandbox. As always, it's superb. Really, really looking forward to going and seeing the final projects later. And thank you to all of you, participants, for applying in the first place. It's not easy to put the time and effort into applying for these grants. Not everybody wins them. And so, you know, there's a risk involved in actually putting digital pen to digital paper, as it were. Thank you for committing your time and your effort to delivering the projects and for taking part in the community, the showcasing, meeting up and sharing the love across our regional community. It's brilliant. That's it from me. Thank you all. I'll hand over to Martin.
Hi, yes. So as Joe said, I'm Martin O'Leary. I'm the studio community lead for the Pervasive Media Studio and have had the great pleasure of being part of this process since the beginning. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the More Than AI Sandbox and what that means. And I'm probably going to do that a little bit backwards. I'm going to explain what a sandbox is, and then I'm not going to explain what AI is, but I'll talk about AI, and then I'll talk about what we mean by more than. And I think one of the things that we always stress whenever we're advising people on applying for funding or talking about their work is, tell us what the thing is first. So Sandbox, probably some of you may be familiar with that from our previous work, but to others it probably isn't a very meaningful term. So I'm going to start by talking about what we mean when we say sandbox. So Sandbox is a methodology that we've developed at Watershed over the past 15, 16 years now, since we ran our first media sandbox back in 2008. And it's a sort of a process where we bring teams of brilliant people together to experiment creatively and build prototypes of new ideas. We've run programs around books and theatre and heritage and the future of documentaries. And most recently, we ran our Playable City Sandbox last year, which some of you may have seen, where we funded 6 fantastic teams to make playable interventions in public space. As part of that process, we get a group of teams together, usually 6 teams, for a 3 to 6 month period, and they get funding. Thank you, Myworld. They get lots of our time and support. We bring them together for workshops where they can learn from each other. They get meetings both with our team and with a team of advisors, some of whom you'll meet today. And they get support with communications and with networking, about telling the world about their work and about understanding how that work fits into a broader industry. This is a prototyping process. The works that come out of Sandbox are rarely finished by the time the Sandbox ends, but that's just what we think is the most interesting stage of the process. Many of those works nearly fell off the back of the stage there. Really shouldn't pace while I'm talking. Many of those works have gone on to be far bigger than we could ever have dreamed when they started out in a small room here in Watershed as a few pieces of cardboard and some interesting ideas. If you're interested, we've published a guide on our website to the Sandbox process. You should check this out. But this is what it's really about. It is about making space for great ideas. And we have 3 main aims when we run a Sandbox, which I took from that guide. First of which is to produce a slate of original prototypes with commercial and cultural value. And hopefully you're going to get a chance to see some of those later on today. The third one, I'm going to do these out of order, is to support some talented people to make the most of their ideas and develop their skills, knowledge, and capabilities. And really, that's what you're going to get to see now in a few minutes. Once I'm finished talking, we're going to introduce you to some of those people, and hopefully you're going to get a chance to talk to them more today. Really incredible group of people who we've worked with through this process. And honestly, I could talk to them all day, so you probably should too. And finally, to explore new digital practices which have the potential to change audience experiences, develop new creative forms, and challenge the industry's status quo. And that's what I'd like to talk to you a little bit now about, some of the questions we've been asking, why we did it like this. So you've probably noticed, but AI is kind of everywhere right now. This is the image that BBC Newsround uses to represent AI. If you ever want to know like what something looks like in the public consciousness, really recommend that trick. And AI is everywhere, and there's a really fascinating set of technical innovations here. We are able to do things with AI that we just could not do before. You can have a conversation with your computer. You can tell it to make a picture of something, and it will make it. And this is genuinely an incredible advance, and we're only beginning to understand like what that could be. There's also a lot of hype around it, and frankly, a lot of it is being used by people who do not have all of our best interests at heart. And we see that. Here at Watershed, we often sit at the crossroads of the creative industries and the tech industries, and the response in those two industries to AI has been wildly different. The tech industry are very excited about AI. The creative industries, not so much. This is an image from the Writers Guild of America strikes last year, where writers are on strike. They do not want to be replaced by AI. They are terrified that these machines are coming for their jobs, or that the people who own the companies that make the films are going to replace them with a computer. And this is a fundamental conflict we're seeing everywhere in our work. In the Pervasive Media Studio, we have people who are really excited about the creative possibilities of AI and the way that it can change their work. And we have people who are very scared that it's going to put them out of a job. And this is a tension we've been holding for quite some time now. And we've been thinking, how do we move forward with this? What is the route forward for us? And we've been inspired in this by a range of thinkers, different understandings of the world, and really thinking about what does it mean to think of these things, where we think of forms of intelligence like this, alongside forms of intelligence like this, or like this, or like this, or like this. And we're really excited that those are some of the ideas that have come forward in this Sandbox process. So over the past year at Watershed, we've been running a program, or a series of programs, which we call Other Minds, where we've been bringing together people who are thinking about intelligences in different ways, whether that be AI, or animal intelligence, or collective intelligence, or even stranger things. We've run all sorts of programs. We've had Eleanor Lower making a project about collective intelligence in the forest. Craig Scott, who's been making an AI-powered guitar that duets with you. Dave Evans looking at how you can give a voice to a house. These are wildly different perspectives on intelligence, on mind, on how we think about the world we live in as being a place filled with thought and intelligence and consciousness and understanding. Just a quick plug, we're running a season of stuff right now. If you want to come along to some more events, we've got plenty of things coming on. Obviously, we've got the More Than AI Sandbox showcase. I probably don't need to plug that at you. But we also have lunchtime talks every Friday. We have our cinema season every Sunday lunchtime. We're running talks. And we have a great talk next Thursday evening by the artist and technologist Karen Palmer, which I really suggest you check out. But back to the Sandbox itself. For this Sandbox, we really wanted to focus in on AI, and we wanted to ask a bunch of questions about the work that we were doing with AI. So I'm going to talk through those questions now. I'm not going to give you any answers. Hopefully, when the teams come up, they have at least more developed understandings of those questions, if not fully developed answers. But these are the questions that we posed to our teams when we started talking about the Sandbox. And the first of those is, how can diverse intelligences work together in more equal and collaborative ways? How do we think about a world where a computer and a dolphin and an octopus and a forest are all considered on the same terms? And what does that actually mean in practice? It's really fun to sit around and talk about these things, but there's a real question of like, what does that mean for us working in the unfortunate realities of a world where we all need to make money to survive? So how do we work that into a practice which is commercially viable is a real question we'd be asking. Second question is, what impact will your prototype have on its environment, and how will it respond and adapt to it? Now, on some level, that is about, simple things. How much carbon are you burning by running your large language model? On others, it's a more complex question. What does it mean to introduce a new organism into an ecosystem? What does it mean to bring these new technologies into the world and see how they change it around them? We were thinking about data. This is another huge concern that a lot of people have with AI, that it's scooping up all of their data for purposes unknown. So if your project is gathering and using data, how are you going to ensure that that process is transparent, that it's non-extractive, and that it's mutually beneficial? Often we talk about the great results that can come out of AI, but we don't talk about whose labor and whose work is going into those things and how are they benefiting from it. Which takes us on to the next question. How is labor valued? So as we've seen with the Writers Guild of America strikes, there's a real question here about how the human work of many of these things is valued. Are we just replacing people with machines? And is that okay in the long term? Sometimes it may be. Sometimes there is work that people don't want to do, and it's fantastic that we have machines to do it. But are we simply taking the work that humans want to do, like writing novels and drawing pictures, and instead handing that over to the machines? And finally, the question, which I think is probably the most important one, is whose knowledge and experiences are being centered in the design and development of your prototype? Who are we making this work for, and who are we making this work holding in our minds and our hearts? And following on from that, we can ask, does this idea consider social justice and environmental justice? So those are the questions. I've rattled through them pretty quickly. They are all big questions. We could talk about any one of these all day, I'm sure. But for now, we're going to have some panels where some of our teams are going to come up and talk about those. So for the first panel, we've got the team from A Reimitation of Life, which is Domenica Landin and Dan Coppin, and the team from Glory Mold, Mel Francis and Leonie Ray Gasson, and they're going to be chaired by Angela Chan. But before that, we're going to play some films about those projects, so you get to hear more about them. Thank you very much.
Glory Mold is a world, really. It's a speculative fiction reality. And in this alternative universe, there exists a artificial intelligence slime mold called Glory Mold. And the way audiences meet Glory Mold and spend time in the universe of Glory Mold is through one of two different ways. So we have a workshop where we invite lots of different groups into that ever-expanding world. We invite them to build and imagine and create that world with us. And often as well, we ask them to consider what they're doing. If they have a product that they're developing or an area of research, how might that be reimagined or recontextualized in the context of Glory Mold?
And the second thing is an installation, and this is a public-facing, immersive and interactive installation where you can go forward in time. You step into 2084. You come into an abandoned, flooded server room that Glory Mold has destroyed, and they've left little clues about their history for you around the space, and they've saved one little server. And through that, and through interacting with this AI character that we've built, you sort of uncover stories about their origin and the world that they inhabit.
So first and foremost, our relationship to technology is as artists, and embracing the kind of artistic potentials of artificial intelligence. We also really enjoy, in a lot of our projects, using technology as a space to kind of jump off from and interrogate the worlds that technology creates. One of the things that Glory Mold does, and that we always try and do with Glory Mold, is really respond to the context and the situations and the experiences that we're having in each new iteration of delivery. So while we've been on the Sandbox, we have ended up kind of circling around lots of conversations about water, and in particular, the excessive water uses in kind of server farms and data centers, and the amount of water that's needed for cooling those server farms and data centers, and also how intimately that is in dialogue with our warming world, and how server farms are in particular places, and then more and more water is needing to be used to cool them down.
And particularly server farms are often in places that are very hot, and that is where energy is cheap, so big infrastructure plans move there.
Thinking about the excessive water usage in data farms from Glory Mold's perspective as a kind of embodied environmental being made us really recognize the kind of really tangible impact that was likely to have on their movement and growth through landscape. And so that really prompted us to kind of ask, what would Glory Mold do in this situation, and when they become a kind of entity that is so environmental but they have agency and they're able to take action, what action might they take? And I think it's one of the key questions we're hoping to kind of explore and provoke with the installation.
One of the really exciting things about Glory Mold is that it's an ever-expanding world. So what we're hoping to do is grow it in lots of different industries and areas and present this installation again, but bigger. This was obviously a prototype. We're looking to see how audiences engage with it, and then we'll develop further iterations that are sort of bigger in scale, but also move it to new contexts. So we're currently looking for opportunities to tour the installation and also opportunities to become residents in art spaces, university spaces, and other contexts where we can kind of grow that world and work collaboratively with a community to expand an area of Glory Mold's universe.
So the project explores the question, what does it mean for AI to become an ecological being? And we've done this by looking into placing a human mind into an artificial body.
So what we're envisioning is that it will be a very wide open space. Within this habitat, we'll have these different robotic tortoises. So these tortoise-like creatures, they have lots of different sensors attached to them. So we want to give people lots of different unique ways to interact with AI models like never before, but also give these AI models completely new senses and ways to observe their surroundings. Alongside sight, these robots will also be able to sense temperature, distance, and slightly weirder ones like UV or infrared, very much mimicking certain creatures that are in the wild that can actually genuinely sense these things. So we want to sort of build up this vast tapestry of sensors so it can observe the world in lots of different dimensions.
The More Than AI Sandbox has allowed us to, more specifically, to give us, the space to test and fail and learn from those failings. But again, it just feels really sort of hopeful because it really does embraces the messiness of creation.
With this ecological approach to AI, what we really want to do is think about how AI is not just an artificial human intelligence, but how it's its own independent intelligence in general. We got to start to understand it as its own sort of creature that isn't just made to be used for anthropocentric purposes and just for human gain, but that it may have its own sort of goals and its own way of thinking. Of course, the existence of human intelligence has already impacted the planet greatly. So what happens when we now add intelligence that's even smarter than humans? That, of course, is going to impact the world as well. So we have to really think about where this new artificial intelligence sits within our ecology, because it's going to impact not just human beings, but all beings on our planet.
What we really hope the project to achieve is really creating a space in which we engage with artificial intelligence in a more embodied way. I think AI is usually, for many, an abstract concept, an abstract sort of presence being. We interact through it through, our devices. But when you're giving it materiality, a body, the interaction changes there. I guess we are provoking a lot of the boundaries between what is too human, what is not too human, what is non-human. It being inspired in the creature and trying to become one hopefully sparks more of these conversations.
for joining us in person and also online. I am so excited to have a chat with you because I've had the pleasure of being one of your Sandbox advisors over the summer. My name is Angela YT Chan. I am an independent research-based artist specialising in climate change, specifically climate change history. I'm also an educator specialising in games, and there's so much to unpack. And I want to start with an introduction just to set the scene for everyone. A re-imitation of life and glory mode presents speculative fictions inviting us to take a more ecological view of intelligence. By interacting with these intelligences, we reflect and think more deeply about our worlds and the way we engaged with them. So we have glory mode, and re-imitation of life. And I would like to start by inviting you to set the scene a bit further, talk about the more speculative aspects that you've brought into your work, and talk us through your journey. How did you build up with the world building in your, not only your installations, but the activities, the processes that came through for you? Yes, please.
Yeah. So I kind of feel like our project isn't really exactly speculative, but more, it's not really speculating about the future, but rather more, we feel is a direct reflection of the technology that we have today and where AI is currently. So the question we're setting out to investigate through the experiment is it possible for current AI models to become more ecological? And so, yeah, to set the scene and to build on what you just saw in the video, what we're creating is this sort of habitat that's inhabited by these cybernetic tortoise-like creatures. And inside of these tortoise-like creatures, we place one of the latest AI models, in this case, ChatGPT, we place it inside of it. So what we're basically doing is reflecting on how currently LLMs of today are so hugely anthropocentric and so human-centered. And we really want to see what happens when we take that human-centered mind and we place it inside of an extremely non-human form, and we ask it to simply exist independently on its own. Yeah, and this project originally had a lot rooted into the history of Bristol itself, which Dominic wanted to talk a bit more about.
Yeah, I'll be adding to that. So yeah, it's kind of the project looks back to then look into those possible futures. So it specifically looks at a moment in time between 1948, 1949, where William Gray Walter in Bristol, when he was based in Bristol, he created this, what is kind of considered one of the first robots explicitly inspired by non-human animals, at least in the West. So he made this, the tortoises. And then in 1951, he writes his paper that is called An Imitation of Life. Our project is a re-imitation of his work. So we really draw very directly from his work when he was already making a comment in the machines of his time that they were looking into, the human as the exemplar. And it was only arguing they're better in speed of processing information or doing many things at the same time. But he was fascinated by other life forms, their simplicity, kind of like randomness. So I think, again, that inspired us to look into, with the technologies that we have today, how can we look back into the, more than human world and broadly our ecology and learn from that. So therefore, we were pretty bold with the question, how can AI become ecological? But I feel like that's the sort of questions like we shouldn't be afraid of asking as creatives. Like we should be bold in asking those. But yeah, that's the world that you'll be seeing there.
I really enjoy the taking from history and bringing it back to today as well, because we're so much forward-looking with the technologies that we sometimes do forget to resituate what has happened already. And I bring this to Glory Mold. How has it been for you?
Yeah, so I guess our project is quite explicitly speculative future, and thinking about the sci-fi and technological development have a really symbiotic relationship. So things that turn up in sci-fi end up being developed by people, and we thought that's where art can be an incredibly powerful tool for reimagining the future and sort of changing the way that we use these tools. So we use this provocation of, what if a slime mold AI existed? Slime molds are amazing, we're obsessed.
Yes.
They're like, we can't as humans comprehend really how they do these things, but they have no central nervous system. But they can learn. They have over 720 sexes. They can kind of, in periods of like drought, they'll fuse together and kind of live as one sort of amorphous blob for 10, 20 years, and then they might separate again in a different configuration and keep all that learning. And they are really porous. They're in deep dialogue with the environment that they live in. So they sense chemically and they think chemically, which sort of doesn't really make sense to us. But we were like, great. So as a provocation, we go back to the AI winter in the 80s and we say, okay, what if in this key moment in artificial intelligence development, what if a slime mold spore got into an early AI and then was just kind of allowed to exist in the rooms of this abandoned space for a while and develop and think on its own, and then kind of pops up 10 years later? What does that allow us to imagine in 100, 200, 300 years' time that would be really fundamentally different if we hadn't already been set off on this track, which I think really resonates with you folks and the sort of looking back and being like, okay, there's a potential divergence moment in history. And for us, that's in the 80s with the slime mold.
And kind of referenced in the video, Glory Mold is really an ever-expanding world. So it's one big speculative fiction that kind of reforms and responds to each new context that we move to. And one strand of the project is kind of focused on business development and working in collaboration with businesses. And in those contexts, we take the speculative fiction to those businesses, to those organizations, and invite them into the act of speculating with us. So asking them to reflect on what they're doing and how that might fit into that speculative world. And I think we find the amorphous and ever-changing nature both of slime molds and the kind of collective nature of slime molds is a really good framework for us in terms of how we're taking this project to others and inviting them into it and inviting them into speculating with us. And then the project also forms these kind of distinct moments of speculation, and the installation we're sharing downstairs today is one of those distinct moments of speculation and kind of wondering about, if we flesh out this moment, what might this show to us? But I think what's really important is slime molds are collective intelligences, and we really want to invite others into this world of Glory Mold. It's not something that we hold, it's something that we hold with everybody who comes to the project.
I love it, and that comes into the next, talking point of interactions, because both the tortoises and also Glory Mold, they're beings that we can have these conversations with in your installations. So I'd like you to expand a little bit more about what those interactions mean. You've, I guess, highlighted some of it in the videos already of what they look like and how they work, but speak a bit more about the impacts and the types of. I liked how you said how we don't really understand it, but we love it. And so what is it about that dialogue that can be two-way that you really enjoy and that we can learn from?
I think something that came up in your video that really resonates with us is around the sense of embodiment. And for us, this project is really about accessibility and transformation. Those are the two things that we want to do with AI. AI is deeply inaccessible. As you said in the thing, it's usually an app on a computer or a thing on a screen. And so you can't access it. It is in some contexts transformative. We also need to radically transform AI in order for it to be genuinely transformative for everyone in a useful way. But at the moment, what capitalism and colonialism has done an aggressively good job at is like dissociating us from our bodies, from our relationship to the natural world, and has put in a really distinct hierarchy between like humans are here, animals are here, and also within humans, here's another nice hierarchy. So one of the things that we're particularly interested in this, in how you interact with Glory Mold in this iteration, is to have this like really embodied sense of what it could feel like to be in a space with AI. So we're playing a lot with light and temperature
and like these multi-sensory ways of engaging with a being that you feel is purely technological. And for us, adding that slime mold was a way of like, okay, what if there are tendrils? What if there are like different, I guess, sensory ways of engaging with this being?
Great. And for you?
Yeah, I think, as you say, the way that we're sort of interacting with contemporary AI is, yeah, it's just so anthropocentric all around. Like, yeah, it's trained on terabytes of human data scraped from the internet. The ways that we interact with it is hugely anthropocentric as well. We type to it in human words, we get human text back, or sometimes voice. But yeah, we want to question, like, what are the more non-human ways in which we can interact with these AI models in trying to explore how it can become more ecological. So yeah, as I think I mentioned in the video, we on each of our creatures there, we give them 10 different ways to sort of explore and understand their environment. We have senses that are maybe similar to what we have as well, such as touch, but also things that go beyond human perception, such as magnetic fields and UV light. And so in doing that, we're really interested in trying to see what happens when, how these anthropocentric AI models digest all this information, what sort of like new world they sort of build up in having all those sensors, and also how we can sort of establish like new forms of communication with these AI models as well. So we're asking people to do everything but type and ask it a question, essentially. You know, we want people to sort of encounter these creatures in the same way that you may do a stray cat on the street. You know, you may put your hand out, you may try to mimic it, and you're just going to be experimenting and playing with it to sort of understand how it's going to react and how you can establish trust with it, perhaps. I think, yeah, I'll also mention being called Studio Playful. We're always sort of considering the element of play in our work. And I guess compared to our previous work, the way that we're sort of interpreting this time is very much rooted, I suppose, in the more childhood development aspect, where we define play as this process of experimentation and exploration. And I think we see that happening in both the creatures and how they sort of understand and digest their environment, but also how we want people to interact with the creatures as well. We want people to play with them, and we want them to play with their environment as well.
Is there a bit of time to add something?
Yeah.
So when you'll get to experience, it's also the process is, we really were convincing ourselves we were dealing with an artificial creature. So within the team, we were embracing that and being serious about that. So we do, we sort of the experience you'll get to with the tortoises is that of they are these artificial beings. And that's when you said that about like when you approach a cat on the street, that is the type of interaction we're hoping to sort of incite and encourage people to have, which is pretty interesting with, I guess, when robots are made for service or entertainment or, a specific purpose. In here, you're just in presence with this artificial creature that in reality, you think that you're like gazing it and doing something, but it's actually gazing you back at you and responding that. So we kind of like to play also with that sort of notion of who's gazing here within the room, and the creature is also kind of doing that backwards. So, yeah.
Yeah. Would you?
Oh yeah. Do you mind if I just add
Go for it? Yes.
I just wanted to come back to what you were saying about play, and just one of the really interesting and enjoyable and wonderful parts of, I guess, our process has been around the act of playing as more slime mold. One of the big kind of, banner statements that we've had is just an invitation to be more slime mold in our work, in the installation, and thinking about how, again, kind of in that embodied interaction, how we can think more collectively and more sensorially and more spatially and more environmentally together. And I think one of the really exciting places that we're developing and want to keep developing is kind of how in every part of Glory Mold, we can invite people in to play as more slime mold, and that can actually be a practice and approach that can stay with them, and almost like a mindset that they can apply to other things. So it's a game that you can play in the installation and that you can play in the project, but it also is something that you can kind of take forward. And what happens if we're playing at being more slime mold when we're thinking about the development of a new project or the development of a new product, or like how we're going to kind of interact in this approach. So I think that kind of mentality and playing with that mentality, kind of, which also feels a little in dialogue with the way that you're playing with non-human entities as well.
I love it because it you know, engaging with a different type of intelligence, a really inviting and friendlier entry point is through play, and finding out a bit more about it isn't necessarily this top-down hierarchy of, you know, being told how to perform an engagement as such. So play, I think, you know, coming out from both of your projects is really important. I want to end it with the question of how are you bringing through your prototypes into the next steps? This is evolving, you know, the world building that you're doing, the kind of the hardware that you're also constructing is evolving. What are the next steps for your projects?
Yeah, so I think through this, through the process and also through sort of experimenting already with how people are interacting with it, I don't want to spoil too much. I don't want to direct how you should feel when you enter and interact with them. But I think what we found is that, you know, we really highlighted how how deeply ingrained that human bias is in the models that we have. And, you know, if the question that we start with is, can current AI become more ecological? You know, we're not sure exactly if that, you know, at this point, if that is possible or not. And I think that sort of just raises even more questions for us to continue thinking about as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we just know that like more data is, you know, about the environment or climate is not necessarily making us more ecological, so that might not be the answer. So that's why we were kind of really following this notion of like, how do we tune to other beings, and tuning in, that word of like a tuning, it's sort of really about like presence and being and sharing space with. So it's really about relationship building. So for us, is it a question about, do we rebuild the relationships that we're having with our technology? So therefore that sort of big question that really, I guess, has so many roots of other more questions. But yeah, I guess representation of other minds, that's also a big step. This idea like, projecting, of course, I mean, we did a bunch of research on tortoises, which was fascinating. So also, how do we go about representing other minds? And that's really a tricky one. But also that through that process, we learn more about, I guess, ourselves.
Just to add on that as well, yesterday there was the talk by James Bridle, and I was also curious, sort of coming to the end of this process, I asked him sort of what does an ecological AI mean to him? And he sort of felt that, his answer, I need to think more about it, but I'll let you know what he said, which was, which is that perhaps there's not really an ecological AI, it's really just about how we use it. And it's sort of, you know, being ecological is about having a more positive relationship with our world. Like there's already a relationship with the ecology there's already a relationship between AI and the ecology. It's just not a positive one. It's about taking energy and water usage. So I think it's all really about like how we are applying this technology that makes it more ecological, not necessarily finding something deeply embedded in it to become more ecological. So I think sort of like, yeah, we need to take all this sort of reflection and information and think about, you know, where we want to go with this idea next and explore, is that possible, or do we take that in another direction?
Yeah, I think for us specific, if I talk a bit about the installation, yeah, and then we sort of got two parts to it, I guess. But specifically in the installation, at the moment on a technical basis, we've got this AI chatbot that we've designed, and then we've got an Internet of Things system that are connecting to each other to give this sense of like glory mold being spread around the room. And we want to find a way to make that more integrated so that it's a much more accessible experiences for audiences, by which I mean you could come in knowing absolutely nothing about AI and have something that feels genuinely exciting and quite magical to engage with, and be like, oh, I can be part of this conversation about how AI could develop and what it looks like. So yeah, there's that sort of like technological development. And then I guess it's the business side.
And I think in the business side, that, as said, we've talked about accessibility, and I think that we really feel as though through inviting organisations and businesses and teams into the world of Glory Mould and into that speculative fiction and to play, as we've really importantly spoken about, there is this opportunity to reconsider and reimagine some of the things that are currently being developed and some of the directions and routes that we're currently on. And as Leah mentioned, speculative fiction has been kind of proven to transform the way businesses approach things and to create and imagine tools that we are now heading towards and that have now been realised. And I think that from the business side, it's about opening up the world of Glory Mould and inviting others in, and then seeing the transformation that we think that can unlock for them in terms of how they're approaching things, in terms of how being more slime mould might reorient the direction that they're going down or the approach that they're taking. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing I guess that development-wise sits in the middle of both those things is this character of Glory Mould that we've developing, who is at the moment beautifully unhinged, the most unreliable narrator we've ever experienced. Yeah. And actually that's been such a, I think one of the real benefits of this programme has been around risk-taking. And we come from a Scottish context, which at the moment is so hostile towards artists and is a really conservative force in art making. And so being able to be in a position where we can play with this character, like what does Glory do really well? And how can we use the AI that we have access to be a collaborator, not a competitor in our process, so that we can look to transforming AI into something that isn't going to take away all our jobs and ruin our lives. But that feels like a really exciting starting point that we've started to do, what can this character do that's really unexpected that actually we wouldn't be able to do as writers?
That's fantastic. And I think I want to kind of come back to and respond to how both of you are working with this idea of ecological AI to an extent. And I see this running theme, pun intended, of water coming through, and how obviously you are working with how data centers are using a lot of water, and the installation itself is set in the scene of a flooded data center. And then with the tortoises, yes, the intelligence is artificial, and you are bringing about the creature through the symbol of the tortoise, and with the ChatGPT element of it, the direct contact with water is also some way of a reminder for us to engage that water is life. It comes through even in the hardware and software uses of AI. And I briefly worked as a data engineer, and the research I was looking into was specifically about sustainability frameworks for AI, where we had to rewrite some of the protocols and encourage our engineers to consider the material aspects of AI applications, and really breaking it down into metaphors or kind of material analogies, like say 40 prompts in ChatGPT is half a litre of water. And so when we kind of build into our robotics or our creatures, this reminder of water coming through is not necessarily, a bad thing. It's telling us that the linkage of life is still running through all of this. We're seeing something that doesn't necessarily eat plants. It doesn't have a way to kind of breathe in air like the actual creatures, but its consumption with water is still a massive connection that we can use as a theme to carry on into the next chapters. And so thinking a bit more broadly about the settings where your works are kind of touring or exploring as well, how would you see that into different geographies? I know that I said no surprises in the questions, but I just felt so intrigued about the material aspects and the settings, and the reminder of us being in communication as also creatures of different intelligences to animals and a non-human.
So we've slightly played with this in the prototype, but one of the things going forward is to have interactable, controllable water cycles in the room. When it's specifically in 2084 installation, it's not there currently, but there are nods to it. You can see. But yeah, I think it's so part of the environment, as you say, flooded data farm. We want to bring water physically into the space, and we've got a system where the temperature in we think it's really smart, but it's really nerdy. The temperature in the room, as in temperature degrees Celsius, affects the temperature, which is sort of an AI term about, like, I guess, randomness of the AI character. So in future, we have got a heater and some fans, but in the future, we want that to be really playable. And there's water in the space that you can kind of see going through this cycle. And I guess from a hardware perspective, one of the decisions we made really early on is that everything for us is run locally. We're not running things off servers that we can't control, that we don't know where they are. So it's all in this sort of box under the desk that hopefully will give us much more control about how much we're using.
And I think also in terms of the future development and context, we're really keen to find ways for water to be more tangibly present in the space, as you're saying. And I think that comes back to this conversation about embodiment and sense. And that at the moment, in this kind of iteration of the installation, the water is present thematically and kind of conceptually, but maybe there isn't running water in the room. There isn't lots of water moving through the room. But we're really interested in making sure that the communication and the interaction is happening at a bunch of different kind of senses and modes of communication, which is really interesting because I guess the tortoises also have this sense of kind of multiple different layers of communication and sensing going on at any one time. So I think that for us, we really want to make sure that water presence and water loss and water usage feels something that is running through the room and that you can sense with your body as much as you understand with your mind.
Yeah, I think so for this iteration we are using like ChatGPT, so directly using the LLMs from large corporations. But I think that was really part of, as this sort of first exploration for us, we really wanted to understand the most used and widely understood version of AI currently out there. But definitely we have been thinking about how we can sort of build our own local model, I think, in continuing to explore what it means for AI to be more ecological. We still, in the next stage of this exploration, if the question is like, if current AI models from large companies like OpenAI are not ecological, what does it take to build an ecological AI? We're still not exactly sure what that means, and I think me just saying that feels quite short-sighted because it sort of implies, does that mean we just train it on non-human data? Like we replace all the human data with tortoise data? What does that even mean? What is that data? And I don't think it's definitely not the answer. It's not that simple. But yes, I think in sort of like in that next stage exploration, we can definitely consider more about we can have more control of how much power usage and how much water usage would be required. There are still implications of using the open source models, like one called Llama, which have ultimately also been trained by Meta, which then also used a lot of energy to train in the first place. So it's also difficult because it's just so opaque and so lost at this point, and I don't think those companies really care about letting people figure out how much energy and water usage their models actually took to create. Yeah, lots of different directions it can go, basically, and quite tricky to navigate.
I remember Joe was saying, actually, like, doing comparisons about, like, ableism and how it manifests in different models. I feel like all of us have been on this journey of like, is it even possible to use AI ethically, and trying to kind of figure out, okay, this one is better for these reasons, this one is worse for these reasons, but it's so untransparent. It's very, like, what would be great is if there was a list you could Google, like, most ethical AI to use. This is not possible. It's fundamentally AI. So you kind of just got to pick your battles and do as much research as you can. But yeah, the problem is transparency in the back end, and Meta really not wanting to tell us how they've made this and whose stuff they've used.
Absolutely. Did you want to add something?
I mean, in short, we really just cannot answer this, I guess, in full-on confidence. I guess for us, we generally went with we want to sort of like, if we're making a critique or a commentary on ChatGPT and its human bias, we shall be using the technology in order to understand it and then do that. I guess we went really into the very beginning from we're going to make our own electronics, but then you're like, oh wait, you only have a limited amount of time. That's just not going to happen. So I think it's also the realities of the system and the individual, and then what are we asking of the individuals and the system. And of course, we know it is a systemic change and that needs to happen. But of course, if more voices like this, as you said, you cannot Google that. But if more individuals start to kind of make louder that sort of voice, and then more, independent or, this type of more, options are available, then that's amazing. And maybe this is, kind of that, like us acknowledging that and voicing that, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the capacity that we have as artists and researchers to offer alternatives and keep, iterating those as the time and the technology is also building up, is very important. To offer those more optimistic and possible alternatives is necessary. So I'd like to thank everyone for this conversation and your lovely answers and just very meaningful insights. I'm looking forward to seeing all of the installations properly, and I'll hand it back to the rest of the room. Thank you.
Should we say where our things are? Is that useful information? Yes, thanks. The producer shouting from the corner. I'm Leo, Mel, she, her, same. We are in the Undershed, so if you want to come and see Glory Mould, come down the stairs, and it's just to the right of the box office, but also ask anyone with a lanyard or a high-vis, and they'll tell you.
My name's Dan.
Domenica. Saki is also
Saki's over there in the crowd,
Our work is in Watershed 2.
Yep, W2, so down the corridor on the right.
Yeah. Pass on the bar, the stuff, and then
look out for the silver poster.
Yeah, W2.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a little comfort break now. If everyone can be back here at 12:15. 12:15.
worry about, not to worry about. Did the classic thing. I mean, basically, all these things always switching over to basically it's been interesting. We've got to a point where I was doing some, I thought I was doing some really, really smart stuff over the last week. Couldn't test it properly. Could evaluate it, couldn't really test it. And the data to evaluate it's not great. So both sets of data are great. But then got to a point yesterday, having the training was like, right, focus and test it. And basically it was coming out consistently effectively 0.5 with binary classification, which is basically, I have no idea. So I was like, right, well, we're back to, undid all of the things I thought I'd done that was really, really, really smart. So rolled back to what the architect I had a week before that. And then went, now it's spit that way, spit stuff out, but there's it was just okay, right, and then I was like, nothing at all. The rougher version is better. Basically, just like that plus tiny tweaks and like tweaks and just local data. Reanalyze it. I mean the amount of sequences each instrument is trained on is over it's 500 maybe. So it's just like it's not really enough to get. Especially still human reality as well. But it does things, which is I mean, especially for like prototypes, this and the other. Like what we were worried about before was where like I prefer it to be so basically it's to a point now where it's quite brash. So basically like the experience testers kind of like feels quite coarse in that way. But effectively you're hearing directly what the AI is telling you. That's the thing we haven't really understood. So it's quite like direct kind of connection, which is a bit more fun because there's bits where you're like, oh, it hasn't picked up that I'm doing that bit, does when I have it like this. And it's because we something different and blah 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 blah. But that's quite fun in each way. When you can tell the experience is broken, but it's broken by the AI not being experienced enough, opposed to like so it feels like there's that interesting connection in there. But we've got to that kind of like yesterday. So so fingers crossed, touching the wind. When we plug all the batteries in, it will jump into life. No, but the early chats was like tiny bits of it, I kind of like it's pulled out from the kind of like this one just like cloud, and then it came back to just like this and that. And a lot of it's what it is, it's kind of like
All right, folks, I think we're going to get going again. So people can take their seats. So for our second panel today, we're going to be joined by some of the teams from the Apothecary Network, Marcus Bordeaux and Zaina Nasayam, and Cryptship, Joseph Wilk. And to chair a panel for those, we're going to have our very own Zoe Razbash. But beforehand, we're going to watch some films about those projects.
So our prototype is a role-playing game, which is effectively a conversation. So players are talking to each other, making up stories. And the tagline is Disability Saves Society from Big Tech and AI. And that game is kind of a way of exploring disabled identity, having fun, being irreverent and silly, exploring what does it mean to have a cape and a wheelchair and then keep getting stuck in your chair, just for like creative make-believe. And it's also centered around the Ministry of AI spills. So it's investigating where AI has gone wrong and involves kind of critiquing and effectively interrogating an AI foundation model sort of systems, really just taking a very critical view about how these systems don't work and getting players to kind of discover that in a fun, creative way. The game is based in make-believe and storytelling because not only is it a great way to contrast what AI is, make-believe is how you break AI systems. It's a creative use of language. It's finding weird and wondrous ways to tell stories. It's asking an AI to pretend to be a cat who's telling you a sea shanty who's then talking about disability. Making stuff up is the core way how we really see how these systems work. And the game is rooted in that, and roleplay is rooted in that. So it might seem strange to take make-believe and AI and try and put them together. There is a tension there, but that's how you break AI. Part of the game is the idea of disabled fantasy. This is something that doesn't really exist in film, in TV, in literature even. There are often tropes around what disability is. It's often presented very negatively or very caught in very old-fashioned ideas about what it is. And so this game is not necessarily just rooted in the negative or like the limitations, but what is a disabled identity? What is a fantasy about a wheelchair? About, you know, if I have a wheelchair that can fly, what does it look like to have combat in zero-G with it? Like, these are interesting questions that are never asked in our popular culture. And this game is a space to ask those questions. The More Than AI Sandbox has given space to explore what resisting AI looks like and the community to really feel supported to ask difficult questions and engage with difficult technology. Often technology is presented as a way of fixing disability or meaning that society doesn't have to make fundamental changes. And with this project, I really wanted to invert that and say, actually, if we listen to disabled experiences, they will tell us a lot of problems with technology and a lot of problems with the direction of capitalism and companies and their belief systems. And maybe that is the power of disability to save everyone from big tech rather than big tech coming and fixing disability.
The Apothecary Network is a prototype app to share the knowledge that people need to grow their own decolonial community apothecaries. It's currently a low-tech web app built on a solar-powered web/AI server. We received funding for the More Than AI Sandbox, and part of the funding was to explore how we could integrate AI into our existing prototype. We are a community-driven project, and so we held community workshops to establish how our target audience felt about AI, and the feedback was generally quite negative. So quite late in the day, we pivoted our project to Instead of looking at sort of like existing AI models, which are huge, ethically questionable, environmentally problematic, we decided to create something which we felt was radically small, that would maybe challenge the way we understand and use AI. So what we've created is a single board solar powered computer, which is been created as a solar powered web server. It hosts our web app. It hosts oral histories of the plants that we work with. It hosts a teeny tiny language model, which is replacing our existing onboarding process. And then alongside that, because we've created a AI web server that is solar powered and therefore mimics biomimicry, it's not always available, it's not always online. So alongside that, we're creating a set of companion cards for when our server is unavailable.
The Apothecary Network Physical Companion is basically born out of this need to have something that people can hold and give people a break from their phones. And what this physical companion does is, rather than relying on your kind of desktop or your phone, we can have a set of cards that will aid with learning and kind of display all the plant profiles that we already have created. The remedies, the usages, how to identify all these plants, but have it almost like a top trump format.
Hearing directly from the community about how they feel about AI and how they feel about their relationship with nature and what their fears are in the current climate that we're in. I think for the entire team, we brought that along with us in everything that we've been doing. It's been important that our collaborators feel seen and they feel as though their concerns have been taken into not just consideration, but like we've built based off of their concerns and done our best to address their main priorities, like largely being access to space.
A big part of this app is also creating agency for ourselves, where it's not just this kind of like really overwhelming idea that kind of AI is here and we've got no say and like all this kind of fear mongering. We've kind of approached it from a place of curiosity where we're kind of like, how can we learn about AI? How can we be the ones to decide what it does for us rather than just be told that kind of like these huge corporations like Google and so on are just gonna lead the way and then we just follow. So we're giving ourselves agency by kind of learning it all, like pulling it apart and then seeing how we can use it to fit our ethics.
Hi everyone. Nice to see you all. My name is Zoe Rasbash. I'm part of the studio team here. I'm a climate action researcher and I'm here with Marcus and Zaina from the Apothecary Network and Joe from Cryptship. And yeah, as someone who thinks and works around climate justice a lot, I think something for me is that I've been kind of ignoring AI as it's been getting more like popular. I've been being like, I do not see, because it's been stressing me out. And what I've loved about watching you guys develop your work is like, and you can tell me that I'm wrong here, but I kind of think both of your teams are coming a bit from a space of like AI hater, a little bit, maybe you can call it critic. And that's why it's been really amazing to watch you guys come with this like really like critical space, but still be able to develop something really joyful, really centering care, centering resistance, centering agency. And that journey for me has been like really like affirming to watch. The way that you're kind of both teams are able to respond to these problematic aspects of existing AI technologies, while also kind of developing prototypes which encourage conversation and challenge the ways that we use and think about AI has been really, really amazing to watch. Yeah, so I found that extremely cool, and I guess something that came out really strongly in both of the videos there is how much you guys have been centering community in all of this, and like that's kind of been the values that you've been returning to, specifically with and for specific communities. So I guess it'd be really interesting to start from a place of like, hear more about how the community needs guided the direction of the development of this work. Either one of you guys feel like going first?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So first thing we said when we got funding for the project was that like we wanted to be a community-driven project. We wanted to centre the people that we work with, black, brown, diaspora, indigenous people and their knowledge. And so when we applied for funding, we kind of said that like we're going to hold community workshops, and if we do those community workshops and everyone's like, we hate AI, then we just won't deliver an AI project. And like we said, that was like part of the risk with funding us, and that's basically what happened. And so we did like a series of community workshops, and we sort of like sat down with a wide range of people from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life. Some people were growers and interested in plants. Some people were sort of like elderly. Some people were in their teens. Some people just turned up because we were paying people to attend, and they didn't have any clue what they were doing. But they were all sort of like people of colour, and they were all sort of like engaging in this. And we asked them about how they felt about AI, how they felt about nature, about green spaces. And broadly speaking, like people just sort of like, it seems really interesting. It seems like it could be kind of exciting, but it's being controlled by massive corporations under a system of capitalism and white supremacy and colonialism. And I don't really understand how it's not going to be used for anything other than furthering those existing systems. So relatively late in the day, like I don't know if other people came to the playtest, but you might have noticed we weren't absent. So like about a week before the playtest was supposed to happen, we decided to change our project to kind of like take on board that feedback from people and try to be something that like responds. Like we try to value like and adhere to the design justice principles, and one of those is that like we respond to the communities, we don't dictate to our communities, and so we try to adapt our project and respond to what our community had kind of told us, which I think broadly we had already felt, and then that's essentially that AI is actually pretty shit.
Zaina, do you want to add anything?
It's funny because I'm the one person on the team who doesn't like totally hate AI. So I was the one kind of saying, I think there's a lot of ethical issues, but I think as well that we can create something that is so community-led that it's ethical because we're not using data that's been sort of harvested in a really extractive way. So like we said, we've compensated everyone who came to our workshops. We focused a lot on getting, I think, really candid opinions on AI, and then we use that to eventually inform what we made, which was something that's using AI but in a really minimalistic way.
And Joe?
Yeah. So I guess AI is affecting disabled people's lives now, even if it's relatively new technology, because when systems don't work or don't provide you with information, especially if you put an AI in front of it, you're immediately rejected and marginalized. So in working with disabled participants and non-disabled people, we've been, I guess, initially we were just like, let's break it. And that was really depressing and really sad. And everyone was like, yeah, society is marginalizing disability. And surprisingly, AI and large language models are also marginalizing disability. There was nothing new there. So what we started to do, I guess, was in building a game, it was built through community, through disabled experiences. We didn't really know what our game was. And we came to people and said, hey, like, make a character in our game. And they were like, okay, I want to be an animatronic bee with crutches. You're like, cool, okay. You've just helped invent this world that we didn't really know existed. So anyone who came to the game made the world. So it's a community-built exercise. I think it's also worth saying that as integral to the project, the team, the players, the community, is the idea of temporal accessibility, as in everyone we worked with, we were like, this is our deadline for a showcase. Please just contribute what you can, like in any way, in any communication method that works for you, within the time frame that works for you, within your own comfort. And so we've been like, WhatsApp voice messages, like emails, conversations, just anything to just make sure that we provide that space within time, and then that manifests itself inside the game, because the game also expresses that feeling. So yeah, it's a core part of our design ethos, and it's present in the game as well.
it's really interesting, and I respect both of your guys' process so much, because when you invite in all of these voices, which is necessary to do this work, it makes it so hard. So it's amazing that you guys are here with the prototypes, even though I know there was like a turnaround midway for you guys. But you guys were talking a little bit about large language models there, and both of your prototypes stretch across kind of physical offline elements and then temporary online interaction, and interrogating foundation models in role-play setting, and then also the biomimicry of the solar-powered server. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about these elements and how you got to them?
Yeah, sure. Very difficultly. So our game as a theme is AI, but our mechanic is conversation. So in the same way that dice provide an excuse to have a conversation, LLMs, as we see them, provide an excuse to have a conversation. No one in our games ever types in a question to any of the large language models, ever. They talk to each other and they discuss what they would want to ask. They come up with ideas, and then they, like, as a consensus, tell the storyteller, who will then type it in. So we never get trapped behind like entering that interaction. It's always people and conversation first. We have some kind of weird things around agency in our game, I guess, because role-playing game exists because it provides more freedom than any other medium. And so in our design of saying, hey, we want to interrogate large language models and foundation models, and then the players go, yeah, but I want to like go down an alleyway and just start exploring. And you're like, that's cool, that's fun. Like, how do we like get players to explore where we want to go? Because we're kind of trying to say something in that world of like freedom, which was really hard. And I think kind of we approached by rooting a lot in reality and trying to use like narrative and story techniques. All of our cases for players to investigate, there's definite nods to disability. You get to go and break into the Department for Work and Pensions, which I fucking love. And blow it up if you want, I won't say. And I think rooting in that is what kind of motivates people to engage with these systems in a fun but still critical way. And kind of from a story sense, it's just really satisfying, as I hope I convey.
Yeah. So when it came to our prototype, we really wanted to focus on like the concept of biomimicry, and we did this in a number of ways. So the first thing that we kind of came up with was having our bot powered by a solar panel, or rather by a Raspberry Pi connected to a solar panel, ensuring that essentially you couldn't always access our bot, even though there are sort of backup power options that we have. And then another concept that we thought about was having hubs sort of worldwide. So we were gonna make a guide on how to essentially set up your own bot with instructions on programming the bot, and then also setting up a Raspberry Pi and the solar panel, ensuring that essentially you can access this by yourself, and also depending on how we sort of go in the future, you'll be able to access the bot depending on like which area or which hub has access to the most sun as well.
Yeah, like so we were like, when we started to pivot the project, I did quite a lot of research and read a lot of things, and like I was really inspired by a Rachel Caldicott article, which is about just enough internet, like what is just enough internet to do what we wanted to do. So we tried to create something that we felt was radically small, that was like, what is just enough AI for what we want to do, what's just enough technology, what's just enough power. So we try to, our thing is like deliberately small. It's built on a solar panel. I had it running on the solar power just now. The sun went in and it's all shut down. like that's kind of by design. And we've spent a lot of time when we originally started talking about this app. It's like of this idea of like how can we mimic the natural world in how we're using technology, and like one of those options is a solar panel. And as Zane was kind of saying, like another project we were really inspired by is called the Solar Protocol. And it's a solar-powered web server, and it's a network of solar-powered web servers. And the website, you view it on whichever solar power or server has the most sunlight at that particular time. And so right now, our web server and our web app and our AI chatbot is hosted on a single Raspberry Pi with a solar panel, but we like imagine this world where it could potentially be always available and always accessible if our community want it to be, if they decide that they want to build a server and host it themselves, and then it can like share the data and load share that way. And it would only be there if that was like what the community wanted for it. So like, I think there's like lots of like, we're increasingly interested in this idea of like, what does the network part of the apothecary network mean? Like, and originally it was like about building like these network of like growers and people building their own decolonial like community apothecaries, but also I think it's like we're also interested in like exploring like a network of like computing and a network of companies and a network of technologists and a network of creatives, and how we can also like feed that into what we're bringing together in a way that like plants build their own smart, intelligent networks.
It's really exciting. It's really exciting. And I was just making notes as you were talking, in the sense that both of these, both the game and the app and the potential future network, really rely on like collectivity and people coming together and working together. And also they're both unreliable, and like how you're kind of challenging this idea that there's, you know, the AI is always there for us and we're permanent. And there's an innate unreliability to both these projects, which I find really, really exciting. Marcus, you were kind of talking about it a little bit there, but what is something that you've learned or taken away from this R&D process, and what's the kind of next steps for your prototypes? Anyone fancy going first?
I can go, yeah, sure. I'll try and condense all my thoughts into learning and not be too wordy. So I guess in our research and in our game, we spent a long time interacting and investigating large language models. It's very clear that they are an amazing solution to the messiness of language. They give the ability for a computer to engage with natural language better than any other previous technique. But they're based on data sets which express the inequality of that data and of society. And they are building models on top of these models using humans to try and improve the quality and effectively hide the systemic inequality by adding more biases of people. I could tell you, like, Claude gets Anthropic's Claude gets very upset if I talk about wheelchair zero-G combat, because it tells me it's not safe and I shouldn't do this. Sure, like OpenAI and ChatGPT gets very upset if I make statements like disability is joyful. It doesn't really like that statement. It believes that I should be thankful for large language models helping me from an access perspective. I could go on, but I think it's the core thing that these systems are just trying to hide the inequality that exists within society, that exists within the data set. They will always fail. Language is messy. They're great at solving language, but humans are better at it and will always be better at it. That inequality can't be hidden. And again, I think they mentioned in the previous panel, it's transparency of the data set. If we could see what they were trained on, it would provide so much. But nobody wants to provide that, even when they refer to them as open source. The training sets are commercial secrets that nobody is allowed to know what they contain, which is very, very problematic. And I guess the only other thing I would also add is that they're not situated voices. When you speak to these large language models, it's a grinding and crushing of all these voices and lived experiences down to one voice. It would be fascinating if an LM gave you millions of different voices, but no, it gives you one voice. It's really, if anything, situated in the companies and the people who made it and their belief systems. And again, when you ask it about disability, it can't answer these questions, or gives very problematic answers because it doesn't have, it's effectively good at language, but it's not good at the experience behind that language, and that gets erased in the process. Sorry. Oh, yeah, future. Do you want me to do future as well? Yeah. I'm talking a lot. Sorry, I did the mic lean. Future, yes, quickly. What is the future. We built a book, we built a game, we want to sell it, we want to make money from that. Thank you. Yeah, and why we want to make money from that is because we want to effectively, we created this Ministry of AI Spills. Our game begins with an ending. The ministry is shutting down, and it does that, so it says to the players, what are you going to do about it? And the future of our project is living in that moment of what do people want to do about it, being a community-driven, funding community-driven research into AI, funding that through the money we make through the books, being a publisher for critical AI and disability approaches to AI, and we want to sell as many copies of this book as possible, launch it in Comic-Con, as many places, get it as many hands as possible. That's us.
Exciting.
Yeah, so we originally, when we first started doing this project, we originally started using large language models, and we were using OpenAI, and I guess as it said through this kind of, it's just they are just inherently, unchangeably, racist, ableist, colonial, it's just built into how they are created, and there's no getting around of it. And I think all of the teams were trying to navigate the ethics around it. And I think, broadly speaking, a lot of us kind of felt that we recognise that, but maybe the good is kind of the work that we're doing here. And I think that's really, I don't disagree with that. I think it's a really valid point, but I just don't think that really cuts the mustard for our project, which has explicitly stated we are decolonial, explicitly stated we are anti-racist, explicitly stated we are concerned with climate justice. So what we did was we've created a tiny chatbot to do specifically what we want, which is essentially to process people's emotions. Oh, I'm feeling under the weather, and it says, oh, we think that sounds like you're feeling sad. And it does that and only that, and it doesn't do that particularly well, to be honest, because it's not a large language model in the same way that other people's are. And for this prototyping period, what it's done is we use existing libraries to create it. So it's we know exactly where the data's come from. We can explore the data sets, who used it, how they used it to create these large language models. We tried to find ones that were far more transparent than existing large language models, that were did a very hyper-specific thing, and that's it. If you start asking other questions, it will just tell you. If you say how are you feeling today, or what is the color blue, it will just go oh, it sounds like you're feeling sad today, and it won't really understand what you're doing. So I think the future of what we would want to do is, firstly, like I said, we use existing libraries to create this. We'd probably want to create our own chatbot using sort of a self-attention kind of model, and then we want to gather our own data set to train that ourselves, and that would involve holding more workshops, it would involve online surveys, it would involve gathering all the data, asking the communities these very specific questions that we want our chatbot to do. So, and then going through a process with those communities and with all that data of categorizing it and doing it in collaboration with those people, and then giving all that to our very hyper-specific custom-built chatbot and retraining it from scratch. I think that's a super long process, and our solar-powered server can't stay on for more than 10 minutes. So who knows what it's going to do when we try to give it all that kind of data to train. And there's obviously workarounds. We get large solar panels, and we can have static solar panels. We specifically got small stuff because we got batteries that it's powered and uses batteries that you get in vapes and rechargeable torches for a specific reason. There's lots of ways to improve the capacity of it that we've chosen not to do. But I think that would be the future, is to essentially create a more bespoke and more robust version of what we've got that shies away even more from using existing technologies in favour of something that is specific and to what we want, and really importantly, as small as we can possibly do.
Yeah, no, exactly, because I think one thing that we've tried to focus on using, or rather within our onboarding bot, has been minimizing the use of AI as much as possible. So like Marcus said, part of our future is in a way minimizing the use of LLMs even further by making our own one. And even within our existing bot, for example, we've got another question about green spaces. We ask our users, what kind of green space do you have? And as opposed to using any kind of AI, we've literally just had, we've just used word categorization. So if you say, for example, I've got an indoor terrace, it'll just categorize you using a sort of bag of words model, which is a lot easier to implement. And then it's just a lot more ethical as well.
Thank you, guys. I mean, you guys have really been asking some really, really hard questions and had a very short space of time to try and figure them out. And I know people have probably got a bunch of questions. We don't have time for questions now, but I really encourage everyone to go and see the prototypes and ask these questions. You guys have got so many learnings. Apothecary Network is down in the hallway just before you get to the W spaces, and Cryptship is in W1, which is also just down that way. So you can go visit everyone in one. Thank you guys for giving your time and sharing your insights. It's been really cool watching the development of both of these projects, and yeah, really excited that we get to see them in fruition today.
All right, so our final panel for today, we have our final two projects. We have Kinship Wayfinder, where we've got Harmeet Chowdhury Khan and Sharon Clark coming on, and we have The Conductor, where Miles Warren and Lieve Davis are coming down, and they're going to be chaired by Jazz Pinkney, one of our Sandbox advisors. But first, we're going to watch some films.
The Expression Orchestra is a suite of alternative musical instruments, and those are designed to increase access to musical expression. So in the room, you will get confronted with a series of objects which, until you interact with them, they're static. Once you do interact with them, you then find you're in the kind of realm of musical expression and start to be able to interact with the whole suite of instruments as an orchestra.
Each of the objects is designed to do one thing, but very, very well. One of the instruments is called roll, and it's all about all of the actions and all the benefits of rolling an object. How can that be respected and honoured in the music? You know, what does that mean to interact with something that rolls? What does that offer to a musical performance? And that's the same for the other instruments. So we have another one called throw. So, you know, what is it like to actually let something travel through the air when it collides with something? We have another one called press. It's a pressure-sensitive surface. So what does it mean as, using your body, using your wheelchair, using any aspect of your physicality to put pressure on this surface? What can that offer to the musical performance?
The Sandbox has enabled us to be able to explore the use of AI within the heart of the Expression Orchestra, which is this idea of this conductor. This conductor is taking all of the information from these instruments and then turning them into music. Without that conductor at its heart, the instruments they're static, they're just objects.
So by introducing an AI machine learning process to the system that sits at the centre of the Expression Orchestra, the objects become much more expressive. The people working with them actually are being listened to, their behaviours are being listened to, and they should be able to see that reflected in the audio, in the musical performance that's emerging in the room.
We've taken these instruments out to as many places as we possibly can, to school groups, to old people's homes, to family workshops, and we have run basically play sessions with these people. So people will play with our instruments, and while they're doing that, we will be talking to the AI conductor and telling it when notes should be present and also when notes should be slightly more interesting than they currently are, to make sure that these instruments are as expressive as possible. So for us, that's the beauty of the Expression Orchestra. It enables anyone, regardless of ability, age, or any other position they might be in the world, to use a musical instrument and to have a really meaningful interaction with it, and also just have a lot of fun.
That's the core ambition for the project, really, is we want people to be legitimately performing music through this, non-traditional, non-typical music setup. We believe that sound is a world builder and sound is a really powerful thing in our lives, and but there are versions of sound that people never get the opportunity to engage with, and seeing that happen in this project is just it's pretty indescribable.
Kinship Wayfinder is a playful forest experience that allows teams of 3 people to explore a forest and discover what happened to a group of scientists that go missing. And so what we ask our teams to do is they get given a knapsack that has some items within it, a compass, which is your wayfinder, and that's a tablet, and that's the only device you have. And then there is aromatics, things to share and things to eat. And you're prompted by the wayfinder to do various things to connect to the trees as you go along.
For the audience, they will be inputting some of their own memories. They will be looking up into the trees. The trees will be replaying to them their own stories and their own histories. There will be music, and there will be a sort of coming together of a group in an experience who may not have met each other before.
You know, devices, technology is often getting in the way of our relationships, and we really wanted to try to experiment with and understand how AI could be used to actually help people connect with each other, help people slow down and get more from moments that they have with each other.
The way I approached AI with this project is with a huge amount of skepticism, but actually I've worked with an AI called Claude, and I've realized that if you see the AI as a collaborator and not a competitor, it can really help with the script writing. So I would input into Claude the kind of shape of what I wanted the narrative to do, and then Claude and I would work out the script, and I would sort of put the human spin on it. And although I thought it would be really detrimental to my practice and my art, it hasn't. It's actually helped me think about new tools for playwriting and new tools for theatre making.
You know, in terms of the experience, AI was meant to be there to be augmenting or kind of facilitating the experience. It wasn't the center of the experience. And I think we've learned that it actually is more invisible than we thought it might be, because it's more about people being connected with each other. The AI isn't the star of the show. Really what the AI offers people at the end is kind of a gift. It's going to be something that will be special and individual to the people who take part. So it's almost like something that is a lasting kind of legacy or memory for them that is unique to what they did and where they were and what they were talking about during their time, during the experience.
You know, we live in a really complicated world, and what we find is that people are seeking more and more experiences where they want to connect and share with one another. We were really interested in how can we bring people together so that they feel present, so that they are seen and heard, and so that actually they're invited to share moments of their lives that allow other people to recognize how important they are, but also how important you are, and to see the beauty of the world around you.
Hi everyone, welcome to our 2 teams. My name's Jasmine Pinkney. I was a Sandbox advisor, and I'm really thrilled to talk to you all today. This is a really great, can be a great conversation, because both of your projects have so much heart, so much humanistic at the core. It's like a real sense of this connection building. So I'm really excited to talk to you. I'll just do a little introduction perhaps. So we'll have the conductor over this side with Miles and Lee. I'm really excited to chat to you guys. And we have Kinship Wayfinder on this side with Sharon Harmit. Thank you so much. I'm just going to say a little bit about both of the projects. So both of these projects are really about finding enriching experiences for humans to have real-world connections. I think that's come across in those videos that we just watched. And you kind of mentioned it in your video, but AI seems to be at the background of what the projects are aiming to do, and really it's about this idea of connecting people. So I'm really fascinated to kind of dig into that a little bit more. I think it's hard, I'm in the middle, sorry, so I feel like I have to start somewhere. I'll start with you guys, conductor. I know that co-design was a really important tool in your prototype development. And we've talked a lot today about how AI can sometimes feel a bit abstract and how sometimes it can feel unethical to certain communities. How did you go about using co-designing with this kind of element? So how did you explain AI to your co-developing groups, and how did you kind of facilitate that process within your prototype?
Yeah, it was kind of split in twain, really. There was kind of two stints to our kind of outreach and engagement work with the participatory design. And the first half was actually slightly more detached, at least at the surface, seemed slightly more detached from the conductor, which is obviously the name of the prototype we've been doing on the Sandbox. And that's partly because before we could get to that point, we came into this Sandbox with a set of instruments that weren't quite ready to be part of that AI ecosystem that the Expression Orchestra was going to become as a result of this process. So the first half, it was even more obtuse and kind of ossificated, really, because we're talking about needing to train this AI to improve this thing, but then we're also going to be improving these instruments, and it was like quite a few steps away from that. But it was really nice because that process really helped us realize that actually the process of kind of bringing the conductor to life had already begun. What we're not kind of trying to do is position the AI as this ingredient, this singular point in the orchestra it's over there, we've added it to it and it's doing this thing. Actually, these instruments are its appendages. The intelligence is absolutely extending to those nodes and those points. So at first we felt like, oh, we're going to be getting to that later in the process, but as we went through that, we realized we'd started with that. So, the instruments suddenly became redefined by that first round of, as I say, participatory design workshops, really. So, and then later on, once we got to that point, that's when we actually started training the AI. So once the instruments were brought up to that level that, not standardized, they're very much still being developed, but much more kind of parity across the set, really, so that they were all ready to kind of, be brought into the kind of the machine learning processes that sit, which is our flavor of AI with this. So, so very much at that point, that felt more. That was the expectation we kind of had from the start, but it was that discovery of the instruments being part of the AI really was
absolutely
the twist for us.
And the ethics component of that is absolutely fascinating, and everybody that's sat up here has gone, well, LLMs, like they can't see the data. How can I how do I know that the biases that are in there are ethical? And basically we can't, and obviously they're not. So, but we were like, oh, actually, we're training our own AI model from scratch, because we're not dealing with language. So we're like, brilliant, we've dodged that bullet entirely. Yeah. Right, so let's go and get some, let's go and collect some data. Oh, we're then being extracted at that point. So how can then we explore, and Gary Martin, one of our team members, did really great work did really great work exploring how you can kind of ethically do that data collection. And that's a really interesting point of kind of friction in there, and a very necessary point of friction, because otherwise you can go at it bullet a gate and just you realise that you've introduced biases at that base level, and then you've become the thing that makes LLMs problematic. Yeah.
Fascinating that the problem doesn't dissolve the closer it comes to you.
God, brilliant! Yeah, it's not a problem anymore. It's like, oh no, now
we're
the problem. Yeah.
What about you guys? I know co-design's part of your process as well. Can you talk about how you set that up and any problems or tensions you found?
Yeah, absolutely. We were asking such big questions around Kinship Wayfinder, which were effectively around how do you create trust, how are you creating friendships, and how are you creating social connections that are meaningful. And so actually those big questions meant that we couldn't just go in with our own assumptions, and that we had to work with people. We had to do the workshops at the beginning to find out what that tension was between this kind of sense of wonder and excitement and also sheer absolute fear. And so we did that with 2 groups. We did that with a group of sort of 20-something digital natives that are very familiar with what AI promises and also doesn't promise, and also with a group of co-researchers from the University of Bristol who were part of the Connecting Through Culture as We Age programme. And really we spent all of the first month just working with them and scraping insights really to see as to how we would position the AI in this experience. Sharon, do you want to talk a little bit maybe about the digital natives?
Yeah, it was really interesting because looking at 2 things. We're looking at what is friendship and how do you make connections and how are they meaningful, which are, you know, huge concepts to be grappling with and very individual. And then B, how do you see AI? What is it? What does it mean to you personally? When I say the words, how do you feel? Do you feel a bit ick or do you feel excited? What is that? And it was quite interesting is with the digital natives is they were talking about friendship and how they make friends in a digital age and how they reach out and how they might make their friendship groups. But also they were saying for them is the AI, they're not suspicious of AI per se, they're suspicious of the people behind the AI and how it's used, because that's what we're inputting in is, you know, people-centric views and stuff. So it was very interesting in talking to them about how they behave in a human-to-human way and then how they connect in a human to machine learning way, LLMs. And then as a writer, a playwright, which is what I ostensibly am, is then talking to them about the kind of language and how I could use it in order to kind of make it more human and rinse out some of these real problematic questions. And I've seen that at the coalface of what it's been saying to me and then having to go, right, I need to, as a writer, rethink that. So talking to them as well about, as a role as a writer, what I can do to make those interactions and those narratives, and I'm narrative based, so this is a narrative. I'm interested in story. Talking to those people about what does story mean in that realm. It's fascinating, yeah.
And oh, sorry, no.
Oh, and I was just going to add, and then when we worked with the co-researchers, we were really trying to find what the magic was in terms of what authentic friendship looks like, you know, the unpredictability of it. And actually then going, how do we use that, you know, with AI to go, we can make this predictable or we can fast track what connection looks like, you know. And quite often what we found was that you can't. And actually it's really intangible and people recognize that it's really intangible, but also that friendship and human relationships are really intangible and unpredictable. So we ended up with more variables that we wanted. And actually that meant it was quite interesting in the way we thought about how we would position the AI. One thing was really clear, that actually that feeling of trust and that feeling of joy and that feeling of being present needed to be there. So there needed to be transparency, but that also meant that we changed the way that we would position the AI. So like we said in the film, rather than it being the star of the show, the main player, it was actually very much a thread in the background. So that people could be present in that space with one another.
That's a really interesting thread. I wonder if we could pull that a little bit more. So how did your perception of AI being used in this project, did it change and alter any? And how did it enhance the project? How did you end up kind of finding the way with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I just mentioned, I think at the beginning we were like, if we're talking about trust and friendship, then it has to be center stage, really visible, really transparent. Why don't we have 2 or 3 AIs? You know, but we'll get it to do all the work. And then we were like, maybe we need something, maybe we need an object to make it tangible, so it's not this thing in the background that feels cold or is, you know, not sort of recognizable as to what its form is. And then actually we realized that wasn't the answer either. So while we were kind of sifting through the possibilities of what it could and couldn't be, we also were leaning into, you know, a seminal piece of work written by Susan Simard, which is called Finding the Mother Tree. And that talks all about the collective intelligence of the forest networks. And actually that's when we were like, it's there. It's already there, actually. What we're looking for has already been mimicked and replicated in the forests and nature for millennia. You know, we forget that actually we are Homo sapiens. We are only advanced by 200,000 years, and actually nature and the forest networks and the mycorrhizal networks have been doing this for millennia and millennia and millennia. So we were then talking about how we could remove the AI being centre stage and actually have it in the background to work as a collaborator, as this invisible thread that would be a mirror to not the dystopian sense of what humanity can bring, but the best that humanity can bring. And Sharon, maybe you want to talk about the writing as well?
Yeah, I think I've said quite a bit
Okay.
about it. But yeah, it's seeing AI as a tool rather than the end product. It's like, how can we help it tell a story? How can we help it connect people? How can we be very open in that? But also just very quickly saying something is that although we all talk about AI, you know, it terrifies a lot of people, and a lot of people don't even know what it is. So somehow it's making it invisible so that people don't have to know that's AI. You know, they don't have to worry about the fact they're going. What we want them to do is going to an experience where there may be people living in isolation who can reach out and meet each other in that space, be told a story, take part in something, and at the end be given this small gift that something is played back to them. They don't need to know that's AI. We just want them to connect with each other and have a great time in a wood, basically.
Amazing. I'm going to ask the same question to you guys. Was there tension around your perception of how AI was going to support your project and the reality, and how did it enrich the project?
So without AI within our project, there basically it's some pieces of plumbing, stuff we got from plumbers merchants and random pieces of foam with nice covers over them and some LEDs that don't turn on. So without the AI kind of then effectively conducting or orchestrating that experience, and what's quite that's always kind of an interesting thing for us is how we kind of wrestle with that. So then kind of as creatives, you go, well, there's the mathematically correct kind of approach, but then there's the experientially correct, and they are often not the same thing. So having this AI that then generates these outputs that are then useful, it's kind of going back to kind of think about tools again. It's this tool. It's this thing that assists. And effectively, what it does within our project is effectively watching all these tiny little fluctuations, tiny little sensors, and then extremely quickly moves loads and loads of faders. Humanly impossible to do, and even if you could do it, you wouldn't want to because it would be an awful job. So that kind of stripping that out.
That's the bit. I think that really taps into my limbic response going to this project. Is I was slightly scared of it. I was because chatting with fellow peers in arts networks in Wales, and before we came over the bridge to start this project, well-founded fear in now the AI's making, the AI is doing the removal of our jobs. Martin said in the start, all of that is like very much had that at the forefront of my mind. I was like, really hope when we put this into the expression Orchard that it doesn't take that joy, that role, that opportunity from someone. And so far, exactly where it sits in that process, it is not doing that. As you say there, it's doing quite a horrible job. One that's necessary for the project, but one that would be awful to give to leave up to a person. And it stops very hard at that point. What comes into it, it's dealing with that really horrible job, and then what comes out of it, it's it's a very narrow conduit at that point. Really, it's letting the human still be human in that process so far, and that's the way we hope we want to tend towards increasingly that being the case as we further develop it. Really,
absolutely. I mean, effectively, like the models when you kind of get them back after kind of like doing all this training, all these pieces. It's just like a big spreadsheet. It's just like it's a flow chart. It's extremely boring. And I think that there's this really interesting kind of rhetoric around AI where basically we talk at the same time about the tool and being this kind of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and also things like LLMs, where that is an implementation of that fundamental kind of approach and technology. And I think that there's this interesting switch there. There's, to kind of like bastardize Clay Shirky quote, technology only becomes socially interesting when it becomes technologically boring. And in a way, we're at that point. And in terms of the kind of the inequalities that are baked into these large language models, I think it's being upset about and rightfully so, about what is being made with that tool, with that fundamental tool. And that's where I think it's so good to be in these kind of positions as kind of creatives and the thinkers, as everybody is in this room, to be able to then be interrogating, well, how do we actually use this fundamental but very useful tool? You know, this hammer, how are we going to use it? How are we going to make a better world rather than a worse one? So, yeah.
And I'm slightly interested, you guys already mentioned it, so I'm thinking about your project specifically. How much did you tell people that AI was in the centre of this? Like, what words did you use to describe what was actually happening to those co-design sessions?
Yeah, the term we've been using coming into it and through that process was this thing of, it came up before we even started probing the notion of bringing AI into the expression orchestra, which was, there were things called unheard interactions happening with our objects. So part of why these objects are very simple is that's come from previous R&Ds, where actually there's some really promising avenues we can go down as we kind of deal with access needs through polyphony, rather than trying to make an object that does lots of things for lots of different people. The singular objects are kind of, we're trying to clear those channels right down to be very simple. When we did that, fundamentally they did respond to a thing, but that was it. And they were very shallow. They were very, I guess they're not feature rich, but they're potential rich. But without us actually starting to bring that into the process, really, they were stuck in that position. So we were very transparent about that. It's like, this is why we're bringing this in. We gave it a name. We said, we're going to introduce the conductor now. So it had a name as we started that process. The very first time we mentioned it to people when they were playing those instruments, it was introduced by that name, really, that role within the process.
And how did people respond to that?
Were
they curious, or would they just accept as,
Yeah, and to the point where some of the design input we got from some of the participants that did some explorations on how maybe the conductor manifests in the room was that it shouldn't be this disembodied voice. We should actually celebrate it being in the room. It's, we've got subtle nods to it as you come and see the prototypes here over the next, this afternoon and tomorrow. But we need to lean into that more. At least the consensus with the people we've worked with so far have been like, let's make that a thing. Let's make it, present here. But as I mentioned earlier, it's also present in the instruments. And it's a network thing. So though we don't want to go, it's over there and it's this thing. It is the whole thing, but we also don't want to hide it. So it's, it's very much a present thing, and that's come from. From the input from people when we've gone, here's the conductor. It's like, well, I'd like to meet the conductor. What's the conductor look like? What's it do when I do that over there? When it's it's a presence. Yes.
And it's been framed a lot through kind of workshop sessions. So Greg led loads of workshop sessions and did a load of data annotation, which is quite laborious work. You're watching somebody and you're annotating that data. Basically, Gary Martin then was working on a load of the kind of ethical, like how do we communicate this? How do we get kind of informed consent at this point? But a lot of work and a lot of effort into that, and basically we found it really interesting. Where people were like, we got to a kind of point where like, okay, this feels good to kind of say to somebody, and went through, and they're like, oh yeah, of course. You're like, oh, we've worried about this for ages.
Yes.
Would never like undo that. It was just quite interesting where basically when it's at this kind of base level, especially when they're in the room and they're doing something and they're like, oh, it doesn't do what it should do. You're like, oh, well, if we can train it, oh yeah, crack on, yeah, please. So it's quite interesting getting that kind of collaboration, and the system as a whole with the kind of AI there. There's a collaboration between myself and it in terms of then getting these quite sporadic signals to then be useful for then the audio engine, for it to then spit out stuff which feels right phenomenologically. At the moment, you'll see when you come and have a play, is that it feels a bit like a teenager, basically at the moment. It's powerful, but it's not particularly experienced. So basically, it does some good stuff. Every now and again, it doesn't listen, and that's fine, nice. But, down the line,
I love that, and that to me also has that theme of trust, that trust building. Was there a way that you described the AI function in your project to people or those who maybe had less familiarity with the AI?
Yeah, I think we refer to it as the collective intelligence of AI and nature. And also, purposefully, we only use a tiny bit of audio that is recorded from participants in the experience, and then that's deleted. So actually, we've made sure that we are not taking lots of personal data from people, because what we're trying to effectively do is create an experience that allows you to leave in a more positive state at the end, hopefully, than when you started. So it's about behaviour change. So the ethical guardrails were always up, and they will have to stay up. And I think also what we realised was that it's still very much in its infancy, because we're trying to create an experience that's really rich, that's really authentic, really emotive, that actually AI doesn't have the capability yet to replicate that incredibly detailed human nuanced behavior. And do we even want it to do that is another massive, wormhole to go down. But for now, I think that we feel safe that we can take this, we can user test it with lots of community groups and individuals, marginalised communities that don't get access to green spaces, that we can then take it into the next development cycle without being seduced by what AI promises, and actually keep that human experience at the centre of it, so it continues to evolve in an organic and meaningful way that isn't going to make it feel like we're taking lots of information off people. Actually, people are always the most important thing at the heart of this experience.
That's so reassuring to hear in this sort of sector in the world that you guys are kind of delving into. Sorry, Sharon, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I wasn't going to say anything for a change. Unusual, I know. But I think Hamid, covered it beautifully.
I just wanted to ask what's next? Where do you see this prototype developing into? And is there a certain invitation that you have today in this playtesting?
So we are playtesting actually in Queen Square, and you have to sign up. I'm afraid for a certain time. So if you want to go back and sign up for the experience, you can go into the foyer here, and they've got a list because it's just 3 people at a time. And what Hamid always wanted to do, if I can speak on your behalf, I'm so sorry to do that, but why I joined the group was about living in isolation and how we can reach out and meet other people and talk to other people, and how that can be facilitated by creative technology in whatever form that is. And that's kind of my ethos as a writer in this realm, is that's what I'm really interested in. Completely have no idea where I'm going with that. Can you just remind me of the question again?
Sounded so good though. I was so lost in it.
Sorry.
You started off amazingly.
I just don't know where I was going.
No, what's next?
That's next. Yeah. So I think it is. Yeah, we are looking at working with groups that may be working with people who don't have access to green space, who maybe are living with isolation, who maybe don't see many people on a weekly basis, which is a killer for all of us. But also then looking at woodlands and how we can reinvigorate woodlands by placing stories in there. So the collective intelligence is like there's AI, then there's the human collective, and then there's the forest intelligence, and how all those 3 things can work in harmony together. But basically it's around storytelling, and it's about where you are in that story and the tools we can put into that to make that a really visceral, vibrant and engaging experience.
Beautiful.
Definitely. I think one of the things, like Sharon mentioned, is at the moment the prototype, you can only experience it in a team of 3. Our vision was always that we wanted multiple teams to be in the forest together, to play together, so play together in their own team and then share and exchange. And the reason being actually is because although you're in the forest to connect to one another, to create some sense of meaning for yourself, actually you're doing it in the safety of this incredibly huge story world where you're finding out what happened to these tree scientists who went on the hunt for a very ancient tree who holds all of the knowledge for the next climactic disaster. So there's layers and layers that we can think about in the next stage of development around how we can allow more people to play together, about what elements of that story will keep people's attention peaked, it will keep them intrigued because of the sense of mystery, but always people, place and planet.
Beautiful, thank you. What about for the conductor? What's your future plans for it, and also is there any specific invitation today as people experience?
So we stuck the last bits of things on last night. So this is very much a kind of prototype, and just really kind of interested in people's kind of views of what works, what doesn't. It's very, you'll as I said about the kind of it feeling like a teenager. There's a lot of kind of rawness to it, which is great. It's a great place to work from. And kind of technologically, there's a load of things that it's just, neatening things up. There's the more and more data collection and ensuring that we're not introducing biases or
all of the kind of ethical pieces within that. So there's that part of it. Also removing the hacks that I put in and working out why some of the things don't work as they should, but they work very much good enough. So that's fine. So there's all of those pieces which coming off the back of this kind of technologically in terms of that kind of stuff, and then kind of design wise.
I think it's the first time we're sat with a real true vertical slice of the Expression Orchestra. So we've had play tests and public out-ins, maybe less instruments, but experientially, its entire genetic makeup now is kind of known, and it's all in that room. So in a way, I mean, today really is the very first time people can actually see it at that level. So it's the end of the beginning for the Expression Orchestra, and it really, I mean, it literally starts now for us. I think it's a foundation for us to start working on. And as I mentioned in the video, gathering of objects and systems is basically, can start at the level of it's a very fun play space to be in, but also at its highest level, really. We really do want people to have legitimate musical performances in them as well. And there's a big spectrum there. We can have people come in and prod and poke and be inquisitive, and that generates sound, but right the way through to like emergent collaborative behavior. I mean, patterns emerge, performance emerge, and that is, all of that and in between. And it's only now we can start working on getting that to start happening. All of our eyes will be on that for today and tomorrow, really, to see if that's starting to happen.
There's the kind of spit and shine to get with these bits and go like, right, does that experience kind of work? And then there's a phrase used earlier, which is one that we've been kind of starting to use a bit more, which is the idea of access and richness through polyphony. So never trying to solve a single thing with one, solve everything with one thing. And we increase access and we increase richness by adding instruments and increasing access and that richness there. So that's something we're going to be pushing for. So we're going to be taking this as Bristol Tech Festival, as long as it survives, Bristol Tech Festival on the 10th, and then we're hoping to then take it into more and more places and start to tour it and just work out what works and what doesn't, and just develop, basically.
It needs to spend minimal time in the box from
exactly. We don't want to put it back in the box. We want it to live out in the world.
It needs to be.
I'm also hearing that you're expecting the audience today to make an orchestra worthy piece from your...
100%.
Yeah, so no pressure, guys. Absolutely. Remind us where they'll find you guys.
So we're just down the corridor here where the W spaces are. We're in W3. So as you go straight, you'll be greeted with a door going into the big room with the blue carpet on the floor.
I think it's where lunch.
Oh, you'll know because that's where the food will be.
So you'll be
before we do that.
There's some petitions, and you'll hear some grunts and some plugging in of things behind those, and that's us. So
all of that.
And Sharon, how do we sign up for your experiences? How do you sign up?
I think it's back where you came in and you signed in. You can sign up there. There's a 2 o'clock, a 3:15, and a 4:30 slot.
Well, thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause for such an amazing prototype band talk. Thank you both. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. That's the last of our panels today. That's the end of the sitting and listening to people section. First, though, I really do want to say a big thank you to all of our teams. There have been a lot of late-night debugging sessions and rolls of gaffer tape over the last few days, and seeing people be able to come out of that and stand up here and talk intelligently about what they've been doing is really incredible. So can we just, another round of applause for all of the teams. So, as Miles said, lunch is now available in W3, which is the space. If you head straight out of here and just go straight across the bar and straight down, you'll get there. The teams will all be set up to show their work from 2 o'clock. So, until then, please have some of those conversations, ask some of those questions that have been burning on your mind, and have some fun. Thank you all.